I never expected to spend my life raising a Bigfoot, but that's exactly what happened, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it for anything. It started during a blizzard in late January when I was 42 years old. I'd been living alone in my cabin at the edge of the forest for about 5 years by then. My marriage had ended badly. My kids had their own lives in the city, and I'd chosen solitude over the noise of trying to pretend everything was fine. The cabin was small but comfortable, nestled between towering pines and a creek that sang through every season. I spent my days reading, painting watercolors that never turned out quite right, and taking long walks through the woods where nobody could ask me how I was doing. The blizzard had blown in overnight without warning. I woke to find 3 feet of snow already on the ground and more coming down so thick I couldn't see past my front porch. The wind screamed through the trees, bending them nearly double. I'd lived through plenty of winter storms in those mountains, but this one felt different. Meaner, the kind of cold that could kill you in minutes if you weren't careful. I spent the morning keeping my fire fed and watching the snow pile higher. Around noon, during a brief lull in the wind, I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever encountered. It wasn't quite a cry, and it wasn't quite a howl. It was something in between, high-pitched and desperate, merely audible over the storm. Then I heard it again, closer this time. Any sensible person would have stayed inside, but I'd learned during my years alone that I wasn't always sensible. And something about that sound cut right through me. I pulled on my heaviest coat, wrapped a scarf around my face, grabbed my emergency pack, and pushed my way out into the blizzard. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The wind drove snow into every gap in my clothing. I could barely see 5 feet ahead, but I followed that crying sound, using my walking stick to test the depth of drifts before each step. I called out thinking maybe it was a lost hiker or an injured animal. The only answer was that sane, desperate wailing. I found the baby Bigfoot about 100 yards from my cabin, though it felt like miles in those conditions. I almost walked right past the creature. The baby Bigfoot was buried in a snowdrift against a fallen log, only the top of the Bigfoot's head visible. If the Bigfoot hadn't cried out right as I passed, I would have missed the creature entirely. I dropped to my knees and started digging with my gloved hands. Snow flew everywhere as I uncovered what was buried there. At first, I thought it might be a bear cub, but as more of the creature emerged, I realized it was something else entirely. The baby Bigfoot was small, maybe the size of a 5-year-old child, covered in dark brown fur that was crusted with ice and snow. The Bigfoot's eyes were huge and brown, barely open, and the Bigfoot was shaking so violently I could feel it through my gloves. The baby Bigfoot's lips had a blue tinge, and I realized with horror that the creature was freezing to death. I didn't have time to process what I was seeing. Bigfoot wasn't supposed to be real, but real or not, this creature was dying. I ripped off my coat and wrapped the baby Bigfoot in it, pulling the Bigfoot against my chest. The Bigfoot was so cold, the creature felt like ice through my sweater. The baby Bigfoot barely responded. Just that weak shaking and shallow breaths that I could hardly feel. Getting back to the cabin was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The wind fought me every step, and I had to break trail through snow that came up to my thighs. I held the baby Bigfoot inside my coat, trying to share what little body heat I had. The Bigfoot's shaking gradually lessened, and I couldn't tell if that meant the creature was warming up or giving up. When I finally stumbled through my cabin door, I was shaking almost as hard as the baby Bigfoot. I kicked the door shut against the wind and went straight to the fireplace, building up the flames until heat rolled out in waves. I laid the baby Bigfoot on my rug right in front of the fire and started rubbing the Bigfoot's limbs through the fur, trying to get the blood moving. It took almost an hour before the baby Bigfoot's eyes fully opened. The Bigfoot looked at me with confusion and fear, but the creature was too weak to do more than whimper. I noticed the Bigfoot's left leg was bent at an odd angle, and when I examined it carefully, I found swelling around the ankle. The baby Bigfoot must have injured it somehow before getting trapped in the snow. I also found cuts and scratches all over the Bigfoot's body, like the creature had been running through thick brush. I wrapped the baby Bigfoot in every blanket I owned and kept the fire roaring. The Bigfoot lay there for hours, occasionally opening those big brown eyes to look at me before drifting back into exhausted sleep. I watched the creature breathe, still hardly believing what I'd brought into my home. The blizzard raged for 3 more days. During that time, the baby Bigfoot and I were trapped together in my small cabin. The Bigfoot slept mostly, waking only to eat and drink. I discovered the creature loved berries, apples, and any kind of root vegetable I had stored. The baby Bigfoot turned out to be vegetarian, refusing the canned tuna I offered, but devouring an entire bag of carrots in one sitting. On the second day, the baby Bigfoot tried to stand. The Bigfoot's injured ankle couldn't support the creature's weight, and the Bigfoot tumbled forward with a yelp. I rushed over, and the Bigfoot looked up at me with such frustration and pain that my heart broke. I fashioned a splint from kindling and strips of cloth, wrapping the Bigfoot's ankle as gently as I could. The baby Bigfoot watched me work with those intelligent brown eyes, and I swear the creature understood I was trying to help. By the 3rd day, the baby Bigfoot had started following me around the cabin. The Bigfoot would hobble after me on 3 legs, keeping me in sight at all times. When I sat to read, the Bigfoot would settle on the floor beside my chair. When I cooked, the Bigfoot would sit in the kitchen doorway and watch. The creature never made a sound unless the Bigfoot was hurt or scared. The storm finally broke on the 4th morning. I opened my door to blinding sunshine reflecting off snow that had transformed my world into an alien landscape. Everything was buried. The path to my woodshed had disappeared. The creek was frozen solid. And somewhere out there, I thought, were the parents of this baby Bigfoot. I spent weeks searching for any sign of adult Bigfoot in the area. I followed the path back to where I'd found the baby Bigfoot and searched in widening circles from that point. I looked for tracks, for bent branches, for any indication that a large creature had passed through. I found nothing. The baby Bigfoot would stand at my window during these searches, watching me go. The Bigfoot's face would press against the glass, breath fogging it up, and the creature would stay there until I returned. I always came back to find the baby Bigfoot exactly where I'd left it. As if the Bigfoot was afraid to move while I was gone, I started taking the baby Bigfoot with me on my searches. The Bigfoot's ankle had healed enough to walk on, though the creature still limped. I thought maybe the baby Bigfoot could help, could recognize a trail or a scent that would lead us to the Bigfoot's family. But the baby Bigfoot showed no interest in tracking. The Bigfoot just wanted to stay close to me, often grabbing my hand with the Bigfoot's surprisingly human-like fingers when the forest got too dense or dark. Winter turned to spring, and I had to accept that I might never find the baby Bigfoot's parents. Maybe they died in the blizzard. Maybe they'd been separated during migration. Maybe they'd abandoned this youngster for reasons I'd never understand. Whatever the truth, I had a choice to make. I could try to keep searching, or I could accept that this baby Bigfoot was mine to raise now. The decision made itself, really. The baby Bigfoot had become part of my daily routine. I couldn't imagine my cabin without the sound of the Bigfoot's footsteps on the wooden floor, without waking up to find the creature curled at the foot of my bed, without the way the Bigfoot would bring me interesting rocks or pine cones as if they were precious gifts. That first summer was a revelation. The baby Bigfoot grew fast, shooting up several inches in just a few months. The Bigfoot's appetite became enormous. My garden, which I'd planted to supplement my own food, became primarily the Bigfoot's domain. The creature would sit in the middle of the tomato plants and eat them straight off the vine, juice running down the Bigfoot's fur. The baby Bigfoot discovered a love for strawberries that bordered on obsession. I learned that Bigfoot were intelligent in ways that constantly surprised me. The baby Bigfoot figured out how to open doors within a week of trying. The Bigfoot worked out how to use tools, picking up sticks to knock fruit from high branches. The creature understood routines and would get anxious if I deviated from them. When I overslept one morning, I woke to find the baby Bigfoot sitting beside my bed with a bowl of berries, the Bigfoot's attempt at breakfast. The baby Bigfoot also loved water. The creek behind my cabin became the Bigfoot's favorite place. The creature would spend hours sitting in the shallows, watching fish swim past, occasionally trying to catch one with limited success. I built a deep pool by damming a section of the creek, and the baby Bigfoot would swim in it. For so long, I'd have to come drag the Bigfoot out when the sun set. One hot July afternoon, I was working in my garden when I heard splashing from the creek. I walked over to check on the baby Bigfoot and found the creature had made a game of catching crayfish. The Bigfoot would spot one, slowly stalk it, then pounce with both hands. Most of the time, the crayfish escaped. But when the baby Bigfoot did catch one, the Bigfoot would hold it up triumphantly before releasing it back into the water. The Bigfoot wasn't interested in eating them, just in the challenge of the catch. That same summer, I had my first real scare. I'd gone into town for supplies, leaving the baby Bigfoot locked in the cabin for safety. I'd never been gone more than a few hours. But this time, my truck broke down, and I didn't get home until well after dark. I returned to find every window in my cabin broken from the inside, furniture overturned, and the baby Bigfoot gone. I panicked. I grabbed my flashlight and ran into the woods, calling for the Bigfoot. My mind raced with horrible possibilities. The creature had run away. The Bigfoot had been taken. I'd never see the Bigfoot again. I searched for an hour, my voice getting hoarse from shouting. I finally found the baby. Bigfoot huddled in the exact spot where I had originally discovered the creature during the blizzard. The Bigfoot was crying that same desperate sound I first heard months ago. When the creature saw me, the baby Bigfoot ran forward and crashed into me so hard we both went down in the snow. The Bigfoot clung to me, shaking, and I realized what had happened. The creature thought I'd abandoned it, just like its parents had. After that night, I never left the baby Bigfoot alone for more than an hour. When I had to go to town, I'd take the Bigfoot with me, hidden under a tarp in my truck bed. When I needed to be gone longer, I'd arrange for my nearest neighbor to check on the creature. The baby Bigfoot needed to know I was coming back. By the time the Bigfoot was 2 years old with me, the creature had outgrown my cabin. The Bigfoot stood nearly 7 feet tall and weighed probably 300 pounds. The creature could no longer fit comfortably through my doorways and had to duck to avoid hitting the Bigfoot's head on my ceiling beams. We both knew changes had to be made. I built an addition onto my cabin that spring. A large room with high ceilings and a reinforced floor became the Bigfoot's space. The creature helped with the construction, lifting beams I couldn't budge and holding walls steady while I nailed them in place. The Bigfoot seemed to understand we were building something together, and the creature took obvious pride in it. The Bigfoot's room became a collection of everything the creature loved: river rocks stacked in careful towers, interesting pieces of wood arranged on shelves, a massive pile of soft pine boughs that the Bigfoot replaced weekly to keep them fresh, a collection of bird feathers organized by color. The creature had an aesthetic sense that surprised me constantly. As the Bigfoot grew, so did the creature's appetite. I planted a larger garden every year. I learned to forage for wild plants and mushrooms that the Bigfoot loved. I set up a root cellar to store vegetables through the winter. My quiet retirement had turned into running essentially a farm for one very large, very hungry creature. The Bigfoot also developed routines and habits that I learned to work around. Every morning at dawn, the creature would go down to the creek for a bath, regardless of weather. The Bigfoot would spend an hour grooming, using the Bigfoot's fingers to carefully work through the creature's fur, removing twigs and burrs. Then the creature would sun on a flat rock until fully dry. The Bigfoot loved music. I'd play my old radio, and the creature would sit perfectly still, head tilted, absorbing every note. Classical music made the Bigfoot peaceful. The creature would lie down with eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. Folk music made the Bigfoot move, swaying back and forth in something that resembled dancing. Rock music confused the creature, and the Bigfoot would tilt the Bigfoot's head back and forth like a confused dog. I discovered the Bigfoot had a remarkable memory. I could show the creature something once, and the Bigfoot would remember it perfectly months later. I once demonstrated how to start my old lawnmower, and 6 months later, when I was too tired to do it myself, the Bigfoot walked over, pulled the cord exactly the way I'd shown, and got it running on the first try. The creature's intelligence wasn't human, but it was profound in its own way. The Bigfoot also understood seasons in ways that amazed me. In late summer, the creature would start preparing for winter without any prompting from me. The Bigfoot would gather extra firewood, stacking it in covered piles around the cabin. The creature would pick extra vegetables from the garden, laying them out to dry. The Bigfoot seemed to have an instinctive calendar, knowing exactly when the first snow would come. One autumn, the Bigfoot fell seriously ill. The creature had eaten something in the woods that didn't agree with the Bigfoot system. For 3 days, the Bigfoot barely moved, just lay in the Bigfoot's room making small pain sounds. I had no idea how to treat a sick Bigfoot. I tried everything I could think of: cool water, warm tea made from herbs, fasting. Nothing helped. On the 3rd night, I lay down beside the Bigfoot on the creature's bed of pine boughs. I put my hand on the Bigfoot's chest and felt the creature's heart beating too fast. I told the Bigfoot I was sorry. I told the creature I'd done my best. I told the Bigfoot that I loved it, which surprised me because I hadn't realized it was true until I said it out loud. The next morning, the Bigfoot was up and moving around, weak but clearly on the mend. The creature brought me a handful of specific leaves from the forest and ate them methodically. Over the next few days, the Bigfoot sought out particular plants and consumed them. I realized the creature had instinctive knowledge of natural medicine that I'd never possess. The Bigfoot knew how to heal itself. As the years passed, I noticed the Bigfoot developing more complex behaviors. The creature would collect objects that seemed to have no practical purpose. Pretty stones, interesting bones, pieces of colored glass I'd thrown away. The Bigfoot would arrange them in patterns in the creature's room, sometimes spending hours moving a single stone until its position was perfect. It was art. I realized the Bigfoot was creating art. The creature also showed signs of emotions I'd never expected. Sadness when the first frost killed the garden plants, joy when spring brought new growth, contentment during quiet evenings by the fire, fear during thunderstorms when the Bigfoot would crowd close to me like the creature had done as a baby. The Bigfoot felt deeply, and I learned to read those feelings in the creature's eyes and body language. Over time, the Bigfoot and I developed our own language. Not words exactly, but a system of sounds and gestures that allowed us to communicate basic ideas. The creature had a low rumble that meant contentment, a sharp bark that meant danger, a soft hoot that meant, "Come here." I learned to respond with my own sounds, and the Bigfoot learned to recognize the meanings of my different tones. The Bigfoot also understood pointing and could follow my gaze to see what I was looking at. If I pointed at a tool I needed, the creature would fetch it. If I gazed toward the creek, the Bigfoot would offer to help me walk there. This level of understanding suggested a mind far more complex than I'd initially imagined. One winter evening, something extraordinary happened. The Bigfoot had been arranging stones in the creature's room while I read by the fire. Suddenly, the creature appeared in my doorway, carrying a flat piece of bark. The Bigfoot had used charcoal from the fire to draw something on it. It was crude but unmistakable. A simple picture of the two of us, side by side. I stared at that drawing for a long time. The Bigfoot had represented us, had created a visual symbol of our relationship. The creature understood that we were a unit, a pair, a family. I hung that bark on my wall where I could see it every day. The Bigfoot seemed pleased by this, touching it gently each time the creature passed by. After that first drawing, the Bigfoot made more. Pictures of the forest, pictures of the creek, pictures of animals the creature had seen. The drawings were never sophisticated, but they were recognizable and clearly intentional. I started saving them, storing them in a box under my bed. Evidence of the Bigfoot's inner life, the creature's thoughts and observations. There were days that stood out, moments that became treasured memories. The first time the Bigfoot successfully caught a fish with the creature's bare hands, the pride in those eyes, the way the Bigfoot held up the wriggling fish like a trophy before releasing it back into the water. The creature didn't want to eat it, just wanted to prove the Bigfoot could catch it. The day it snowed in spring, late May, catching us both by surprise. The Bigfoot came running to my window, gesturing frantically for me to come outside. We stood together in that unseasonable snow, the creature tilting the Bigfoot's head back to catch flakes on the Bigfoot's tongue, looking at me with such joy that I had to laugh. The snow melted by afternoon, but the memory stayed. There was an eclipse one summer, a rare total solar eclipse visible from our location. I'd read about it weeks in advance and tried to explain to the Bigfoot what would happen. When the day came, we sat together on a blanket in the clearing, wearing the special glasses I'd ordered. As the moon passed in front of the sun and darkness fell in the middle of the day, the Bigfoot made a sound I'd never heard before, not fear exactly, but awe. The creature reached for my hand and held it tight until the sun returned. We sat there long after, the Bigfoot occasionally looking up at the sky as if checking to make sure everything was still normal. One autumn, a massive flock of migrating geese stopped at our creek for several days, hundreds of them, filling the air with their honking and the water with their splashing. The Bigfoot was fascinated. The creature would sit motionless for hours, watching them feed and interact. When they finally left, continuing their journey south, the Bigfoot stood at the edge of the creek and made long, low calls, as if saying goodbye or wishing the creature could join them. There was the time lightning struck a tree near the cabin during a violent thunderstorm. The tree exploded in a shower of splinters and caught fire despite the rain. The Bigfoot and I worked together to make sure the fire didn't spread, the creature hauling buckets of water while I directed where to throw them. We were both exhausted and soaked by the time we got it under control, but we protected our home together. That night, muddy and tired, we sat by the fireplace drinking tea, and I felt like we were a real team, not just women in Bigfoot, but partners who'd faced danger and prevailed. One winter morning, I woke to find the Bigfoot had decorated the cabin for what the creature must have understood was a special day. Pine boughs hung over the doorways, berries arranged in patterns on the table, smooth river stones placed carefully around the room. It took me a moment to realize it was my birthday. The Bigfoot had remembered and wanted to celebrate. I cried that morning, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of this creature who couldn't speak, but could express love in ways more powerful than words. There was the day I taught the Bigfoot to play a simple game. I'd stack rocks, and the creature would try to knock them down with a thrown stone. It sounds childish, but the Bigfoot loved it. The creature would practice for hours, developing surprising accuracy. Eventually, the Bigfoot started making the game harder, stacking the rocks in more complex arrangements, challenging the creature's own skill. It was problem-solving and play combined, and watching the Bigfoot engage with it made me realize how intelligent the creature really was. One spring, a family of foxes denned near our cabin. The Bigfoot was entranced by the kits. The creature would lie on the ground at a distance, perfectly still, watching them play. The mother fox seemed to understand the Bigfoot meant no harm. She'd watched the creature watching her babies, and some understanding passed between them. When the kids were old enough, the fox family moved on, but I'd see the Bigfoot sometimes returning to that spot, perhaps remembering. There was a terrible ice storm one February that coated everything in thick ice. Trees bent under the weight, branches snapped and crashed to the ground. The Bigfoot and I stayed inside for 3 days, listening to the forest shatter around us. When it finally ended and we ventured out, the world was transformed into crystal. Every branch, every blade of grass encased in ice that caught the sun and threw rainbows everywhere. The Bigfoot and I walked through this glittering landscape in odd silence, our breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen, made more special because I was sharing it with the creature. These moments accumulated over the years, building into a rich tapestry of shared experience. Each season brought new ones. Each year added depth to our relationship. What had started as a woman caring for an injured baby had evolved into something I couldn't quite name. Partnership, friendship, family, all of those and none of those. Something unique that existed only between the Bigfoot and me. Over the years, there were close calls with visitors. My kids would occasionally announce they were coming to check on me, and I'd have to scramble to hide any sign of the Bigfoot. The creature learned to stay deep in the woods during these visits, though I could always feel the Bigfoot watching from the tree-line. Once a hiker got lost and ended up at my cabin asking for directions. While I was giving them to him, the Bigfoot came around the corner of my house carrying an armload of firewood. The hiker went completely silent, his face draining of color. The Bigfoot froze too, dropping the wood with a crash. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hiker said something that sounded like a question, but came out as mostly vowels. And he turned and ran. I mean, really ran, crashing through the woods so fast he left his backpack behind. The Bigfoot looked at me with what I can only describe as guilt, and I started laughing. The creature tilted the Bigfoot's head, confused, and seemed to understand the situation wasn't serious, and picked up the firewood again. I worried that hiker would report what he'd seen, but nothing ever came of it. I imagine he told people, and they thought he was crazy, or maybe he decided he'd imagined it. Either way, we got lucky. Another time, hunters set up camp about a mile from my place during deer season. The Bigfoot could hear them at night, their voices carrying through the still air. The creature became anxious, pacing the Bigfoot's room, occasionally making low, worried sounds. I understood. The Bigfoot knew guns meant danger. On the 3rd day of hunting season, one of the hunters wandered too close to my property, tracking a wounded deer. I was in my garden when I heard the Bigfoot make a sound I'd never heard before. It was deep and rumbling and made my bones vibrate. The creature emerged from the woods behind my cabin, standing at full height, easily 8 feet tall now, and roared. The hunter saw the Bigfoot and screamed. His rifle fell from his hands. He tripped over his own feet, trying to back away, and fell hard on the ground. The Bigfoot took 3 massive steps toward him, still making that terrible sound. I ran between them, holding up my hands. The creature stopped immediately, looking down at me with wild eyes. I turned to the hunter and told him to leave. He didn't need to be told twice. After he left, the Bigfoot was shaking. The creature sat down hard, put the Bigfoot's face in the Bigfoot's hands, and made a sound like crying. I realized the Bigfoot hadn't been trying to hurt the hunter. The creature had been trying to scare him away to protect me. The Bigfoot thought I was in danger. There was another incident that still troubles me. A pair of wildlife researchers came through the area looking for evidence of large predators. They had cameras and tracking equipment and spent weeks in the forest around my cabin. The Bigfoot had to stay inside almost constantly, and the creature grew restless and anxious from the confinement. One night I woke to find the Bigfoot gone. I panicked, searching the cabin and yard. Then I saw lights moving through the forest. The researchers, they were out setting up night cameras. I grabbed my flashlight and hurried toward them, hoping to reach them before the Bigfoot did. I found the Bigfoot first, crouched behind a large tree, watching the researchers work. The creature was being incredibly careful, staying downwind, moving silently. The Bigfoot saw me approach and made a small sound, almost like a question. I realized what was happening. The creature was curious about these humans, wanted to observe them, but knew to be cautious. We watched together for almost an hour, hidden in the darkness. The researchers never knew we were there. When they finally packed up and left, the Bigfoot turned to me with what I can only describe as satisfaction. The creature had successfully observed humans without being detected and satisfied the Bigfoot's curiosity safely. We walked home together in comfortable silence. The researchers left the area after another week, having found no evidence of anything unusual. Their cameras caught deer and bears and foxes, but never the Bigfoot. The creature was simply too intelligent, too aware of the technology to be caught by it. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt sad that the world would never know what I knew, would never see what I saw every day. My 50th birthday came and went with only the Bigfoot to celebrate with me. The creature brought me a crown, woven from wildflowers and vines, carefully placed it on my head, and made a sound I'd learned meant happiness. We ate fresh berries and sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was one of the best birthdays I'd ever had. The years taught me that the Bigfoot had seasons of behavior just like the forest did. Spring made the creature energetic and playful, chasing butterflies and rolling in new grass like a puppy. Summer brought quiet contentment and long hours by the creek. Autumn made the Bigfoot industrious, focused on gathering and preparing. Winter made the creature contemplative, spending more time in the Bigfoot's room, rearranging stones and feathers while snow fell outside. I learned to anticipate these moods and work with them rather than against them. In spring, I'd take the Bigfoot on longer walks, knowing the creature needed the exercise. In summer, I'd spend more time outside with the creature. In autumn, I'd help the Bigfoot gather what we needed. In winter, I'd leave the creature alone more, respecting the Bigfoot's need for solitude. The Bigfoot also had cycles I couldn't predict, days when the creature seemed sad for no reason I could determine. Times when the Bigfoot would stand at the edge of the forest and make long, low calls into the trees. I wondered if the creature was calling for family that would never answer, feeling the absence of others like it. On those days, I'd sit nearby, but not too close, letting the Bigfoot know I was there, but giving the creature space to grieve. There were also days of pure joy when the Bigfoot would wake up and seem unable to contain happiness. The creature would bound through the forest, would splash in the creek with abandon, would bring me gift after gift of interesting things the Bigfoot had found. On those days, the creature's joy was contagious, and I'd find myself laughing more than I had in years. I documented everything in journals I kept hidden in my bedroom, pages and pages of observations about the Bigfoot's behavior, the creature's development, the things we did together. Part of me thought maybe someday someone should know about this, about what the Bigfoot was really like. Most of me wanted to keep it secret forever, to protect the creature from a world that wouldn't understand. Time moved differently with the Bigfoot. Days blended into seasons, seasons into years. I stopped keeping close track. The creature was fully grown now, massive and powerful, but still gentle with me. A Bigfoot would bring me firewood in winter, carefully placing each log on the pile. The creature would pick wild berries for me in summer, filling a basket the Bigfoot had learned to carry. The Bigfoot would sit with me on my porch in the evenings, both of us watching the sunset over the mountains. I started having health problems when I was in my mid-50s. Arthritis made my hands ache. My back gave me trouble. I moved slower, needed more rest. The Bigfoot seemed to sense these changes. The creature started doing more of the physical work around the cabin. The Bigfoot would haul water from the creek in buckets the creature had figured out how to carry. The creature would dig in the garden, following my instructions about where to plant what. The Bigfoot also learned to be my hands when mine wouldn't cooperate. If I couldn't open a jar, the creature would do it. If I dropped something, the Bigfoot would pick it up. If I couldn't reach something on a high shelf, the creature would get it for me. The Bigfoot never made me feel helpless or diminished. The creature just quietly did what needed doing, the way I'd done for the Bigfoot all those years ago when the creature was small and injured. One particularly harsh winter, we got snowed in for almost 2 weeks. The drifts were so high I couldn't leave the cabin, and supplies ran low. The Bigfoot would disappear into the storm for hours at a time, returning with bark from certain trees that could be boiled into an edible tea with frozen berries dug from under the snow, with roots that sustained us. The creature's knowledge of the forest kept us alive. During that winter, we spent more time together than ever before. There was nowhere to go. Nothing to do but tend the fire and wait for the storm to break. The Bigfoot would sit beside me for hours, sometimes grooming the creature's own fur, sometimes just staring into the flames. I'd read aloud from old books, and while I don't know how much the Bigfoot understood, the creature seemed to enjoy the sound of my voice. One night during that long winter, I woke to find the Bigfoot standing over me, one huge hand gently touching my forehead. I realized I had a fever. The creature disappeared and returned with a wet cloth, placing it on my head with surprising gentleness. Then the Bigfoot sat beside my bed all night, refreshing the cloth periodically, keeping watch. By morning, my fever had broken, but the creature stayed nearby all day, anxious and protective. That winter also brought an unexpected visitor. A young black bear, driven from its den by the cold, tried to break into my shed looking for food. The Bigfoot spotted it first, and I watched through my window as the creature approached the bear. For a moment, I feared a fight. The Bigfoot was much larger, but the bear had claws and teeth and desperation. Instead of fighting, the Bigfoot made a series of sounds I'd never heard before. The bear stopped, listened, responded with its own sounds. They stood there in the snow, two creatures communicating in ways I couldn't begin to understand. After several minutes, the Bigfoot led the bear to our root cellar, opened it, and allowed the bear to take a small portion of our stored vegetables. Then, the creature gently but firmly guided the bear away from the cabin, back toward the forest. I asked the Bigfoot about it later, in our limited way of communicating. The creature's response through gestures and sounds suggested the bear was young and lost and hungry. The Bigfoot had helped because that's what you do. You help when you can. It was a lesson I taught the creature without realizing it, simply by helping the Bigfoot all those years ago. One winter, I fell on ice and broke my hip. I lay there in the cold, unable to get up, pain shooting through my body with every breath. The Bigfoot found me within minutes. The creature knelt beside me, making worried sounds. The Bigfoot's huge hands hovering over me as if afraid to touch and cause more damage. Finally, very carefully, the Bigfoot lifted me. The creature carried me into the cabin and laid me on my bed as gently as laying down a baby. The Bigfoot disappeared then, and I panicked, thinking the creature had abandoned me. But the Bigfoot returned 20 minutes later with my neighbor, having somehow communicated that I needed help. My neighbor was terrified but couldn't stop staring at the Bigfoot. The creature stood in the doorway of my bedroom, watching to make sure I was being taken care of before vanishing back into the woods. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital and rehab. It was the longest I'd ever been away from the Bigfoot. When I finally came home, the creature was waiting on my porch. The Bigfoot looked thinner, and I realized the creature had barely eaten while I was gone. When the Bigfoot saw me get out of the car, the creature made a sound of pure joy and rushed forward. I had to tell my neighbor to stand back as the Bigfoot gathered me into the creature's arms, careful of my healing hip, and just held me. My neighbor pulled me aside before leaving. He said he'd been checking on the Bigfoot while I was gone, leaving food at the edge of the woods. He'd watched the creature from a distance, seen the Bigfoot sitting on my porch day after day, waiting. He told me he understood now why I'd chosen to stay here, alone, but not alone. He promised he'd never tell anyone about the creature, and he never did. As I recovered from my injury, the Bigfoot became even more attentive. The creature would walk beside me when I used my walker, matching the Bigfoot's pace to mine. If I stumbled, the Bigfoot's hand would steady me. If I needed to rest, the creature would guide me to a chair and sit nearby until I was ready to move again. The Bigfoot had become my caretaker, reversing the roles we'd had for so many years. During my recovery, I had a lot of time to think about what would happen to the Bigfoot after I was gone. I was approaching 60 then, and while I felt reasonably healthy, I couldn't ignore my mortality. I started writing detailed instructions for my neighbor, how to communicate with the creature, what the Bigfoot liked to eat, the creature's routines and habits, everything I knew about keeping the Bigfoot safe and happy. I also started teaching the Bigfoot more self-sufficiency. The creature already knew how to find food in the wild, but I showed the big food where I kept emergency supplies, how to access the root cellar, how to start a fire using matches I left in a weatherproof container. I didn't know if the creature would stay at the cabin without me. But if the Bigfoot did, I wanted the creature to be able to survive. The Bigfoot seemed to sense something had changed in me. Some awareness of time passing that the creature shared. The Bigfoot became more affectionate, more likely to seek physical contact. The creature would rest the Bigfoot's head against my shoulder while we sat on the porch. The Bigfoot would hold my hand while we walked. The creature would watch me with an intensity that felt like memorization, as if the Bigfoot was trying to store every detail for later. My hair went fully gray in my 60s. My steps became slower, more careful. I needed a cane, then a walker. The Bigfoot aged too, though more slowly. The creature's dark brown fur developed streaks of silver around the Bigfoot's face and hands. The creature moved with less energy, but more purpose, as if the Bigfoot had learned to conserve strength. We established new routines that accommodated my limitations. The Bigfoot would help me up and down the porch steps, the creature's arms steady under my elbow. The creature learned to fetch things I needed, understanding my pointing in simple words. The Bigfoot became my legs when my own wouldn't cooperate, my strength when mine failed. My kids started visiting more often, worried about me living alone so far from town. They never saw the Bigfoot, though they must have seen signs. Enormous footprints in the garden, the addition to my cabin that I couldn't possibly have built myself, the massive amounts of food I went through. If they suspected anything, they never said. One of my granddaughters visited when she was 6. She was playing in the yard while I watched from the porch when the Bigfoot emerged from the forest. I called out a warning, but the little girl showed no fear. She walked right up to the creature and held out a dandelion. The Bigfoot carefully took it, holding it in the creature's massive hand, then picked the wild flower and offered it back to her. They stood there for a moment, two beings exchanging flowers before the creature glanced at me and retreated into the woods. My granddaughter came running back. She told me she'd met a bear. I asked her if she was scared. She said no. The bear was nice. I told her not all bears were nice and she should stay close to the house. She nodded seriously, but I saw her looking toward the forest, hoping for another glimpse of her gentle bear. The years passed and my body continued its slow decline. I developed diabetes and had to carefully monitor my blood sugar. The Bigfoot learned to recognize when my levels were off, would bring me juice or make me eat when I needed to. How the creature knew, I couldn't say, but the Bigfoot was rarely wrong. My hearing started to fade, and I got hearing aids that I constantly forgot to wear. The Bigfoot would tap the creature's own ears and point at mine, reminding me to put them in. The creature seemed to understand that I needed them to hear properly to stay connected to the world. On my 70th birthday, my kids threw me a surprise party at the cabin. I spent the whole time terrified the Bigfoot would appear, but the creature stayed hidden. After everyone left, I found the Bigfoot sitting at the edge of the forest, looking lonely and excluded. I felt terrible. The creature had stayed away to protect me, to keep our secret, even though the Bigfoot wanted to be part of the celebration. That night, I made a small cake, just for the two of us. The Bigfoot had never had cake before and approached it cautiously. The creature took a small bite, eyes widening with surprise and pleasure. We sat on the porch eating cake and watching stars emerge. And I told the Bigfoot this was the real celebration, just the two of us, the way it had always been. The seasons continued their cycle. Spring brought new growth, and the Bigfoot would bring me the first wild flowers, laying them beside my morning coffee. Summer brought long, warm days, and the creature would carry me to the creek, setting me in a chair where I could watch the Bigfoot swim like I had decades before. Fall brought harvest, and the Bigfoot would pile vegetables at my door, the creature's contributions to our winter stores. Winter brought snow, and the Bigfoot would build up massive fires, keeping me warm through the cold months. My memory started to slip in my mid-70s. I'd forget what day it was, why I'd walked into a room. Sometimes I'd forget to eat, and the Bigfoot would gently push food toward me. The creature seemed to understand that my mind was failing the way my body had, and the Bigfoot compensated for both. There were days when I'd wake up confused, not recognizing where I was. On those days, the Bigfoot would sit beside me and make soft sounds until the fog cleared. And I remembered the creature's presence was an anchor, something constant that my failing mind could hold on to. I also had moments of startling clarity when everything came rushing back. On those days, I'd feel overwhelmed by gratitude for this strange life I'd lived, for this creature who'd chosen to stay with me. I tried to tell the Bigfoot how much it meant to me, how the creature had saved me in ways that had nothing to do with physical rescue. I don't know if the Bigfoot understood my words, but the creature would hold my hand and make sounds that felt like understanding. By the time I reached 70, I rarely left my cabin. The Bigfoot did all the work. Now, the creature tended the garden, gathered firewood, brought water, even figured out how to use my old truck to get supplies from town. The Bigfoot would hide in the truck bed under a tarp, and I'd make a list. The creature would wait until dark, then slip into the store through the back door I'd arranged with the owner. It sounds impossible, but we made it work. I spent most of my time sitting on my porch or in my chair by the fire. The Bigfoot would sit with me for hours, both of us comfortable in the silence. Sometimes I'd tell the creature stories about my life before, my marriage, my kids, my choices. The Bigfoot would watch my face intently, and I believed the creature understood. If not the words, then the emotion behind them. One evening in late summer, I was having trouble breathing. My chest felt tight and my left arm ached. I recognized the signs of a heart attack. I called for the Bigfoot and the creature came running. I managed to tell the creature to get help, to go to my neighbor. The Bigfoot hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave me, but finally turned and ran. The paramedics arrived to find the Bigfoot sitting on my porch, keeping watch. The creature had led them to my cabin and then positioned the Bigfoot's body between them and my door, only moving when I called out that it was okay. They worked on me while the Bigfoot watched through the window, the creature's face pressed to the glass, breath fogging it up like that day, so many years ago when I'd first started my searches. I survived that heart attack and the next one 6 months later. Each time, the Bigfoot never left my side during recovery. The creature would sit beside my bed for hours, sometimes reaching out to gently touch my hand as if reassuring the Bigfoot that I was still alive. My kids started talking about moving me to assisted living. They meant well, but the thought of leaving my cabin, leaving the Bigfoot, was unbearable. I told them I was fine. I told them I had help. They didn't understand what I meant, but they stopped pushing when they saw how adamant I was. The truth was, I knew my time was limited, my body was wearing out. But as long as I had the Bigfoot, as long as we had each other, I wanted to stay right where I was. This cabin, this forest, This life we'd built together. It was enough. It was more than enough. I started writing letters to my children to be opened after my death. In them, I explained about the Bigfoot. I told them the whole story from finding the creature as a baby to growing old together. I explained about my neighbor and the store owner, about the arrangements I'd made for the Bigfoot's care. I didn't know if they'd believe me, but I needed them to know the truth. I also made videos. My neighbor helped me set up a camera, and I recorded myself talking about the Bigfoot, about our life together. I filmed the creature from a distance, showing how the Bigfoot moved, how the creature worked in the garden, how the Bigfoot cared for me. Evidence, I thought, proof that this had all been real. The Bigfoot seemed to understand what I was doing. The creature would pose for the camera, would demonstrate the tasks the Bigfoot had learned. Sometimes the Bigfoot would bring the creature's drawings to show, as if wanting to document the Bigfoot's own story. It felt important, this recording of our lives, like we were leaving something behind for the world, even if the world never fully understood it. My 75th birthday came, and I felt ancient. My body was a collection of aches and pains. My hands shook constantly. I needed help with almost everything, but I was still here, still breathing, still able to sit on my porch and watch the Bigfoot work in the garden, still able to share meals and evenings and quiet mornings with this creature who'd become my family. That winter was particularly hard. I caught pneumonia and spent 2 weeks barely conscious. The Bigfoot nursed me through it, keeping me warm, making sure I drank fluids, sitting vigil while I fought for breath. My neighbor came by daily to check on me, bringing medicine. But it was the Bigfoot who kept me alive. The creature's determination, the Bigfoot's refusal to let me go, pulled me back from the edge. When I finally recovered enough to sit up and take notice, I found the Bigfoot had lost weight. The creature had been so focused on me that the Bigfoot had forgotten to eat properly. I scolded the creature gently and made the Bigfoot promise to take better care. The creature looked at me with those deep brown eyes, and I saw the fear there, the terror of losing me. I understood. I felt the same way about losing the Bigfoot. We settled into new patterns after that illness. The Bigfoot insisted on checking on me constantly. If I napped, the creature would sit nearby, keeping watch. If I went outside, the Bigfoot would hover close, ready to catch me if I stumbled. It was exhausting being monitored so closely, but I understood the Bigfoot's need to protect me. I'd felt the same way all those years ago when the creature had been small and vulnerable. Spring came again, and with it, new life. The Bigfoot planted our garden with extra care that year, as if the creature understood. We might not have many more springs together. The garden flourished under the Bigfoot's attention, producing more vegetables than we could possibly eat. The creature gave the surplus to my neighbor, who distributed it to others in need. It pleased the Bigfoot to provide for others. I think another lesson learned from our years together. That summer, one of my sons came to visit with his family. They stayed for a week, and the Bigfoot had to hide deep in the forest the entire time. I could see the creature occasionally, just a shadow at the edge of the trees, watching. When they finally left and the Bigfoot emerged, the creature was anxious and clingy, unwilling to let me out of sight. We spent that evening on the porch, the Bigfoot's head resting against my shoulder while I stroked the creature's fur, and told the Bigfoot that yes, I was still here. We were still together. My memory continued to deteriorate. I'd forget things mid-sentence. I'd call the Bigfoot by wrong names, confusing the creature with people from my past. The Bigfoot would patiently wait for the confusion to clear, never seeming upset or frustrated. On my worst days, when I didn't recognize the cabin or remember where I was, the Bigfoot's presence was the only thing that felt real and safe. There were moments of startling clarity too, times when everything would snap into focus and I'd remember every detail of our years together. In those moments, I'd feel overwhelmed by the improbability of it all, that I'd found this creature, that we'd built this life, that after all the loneliness and disappointment of my earlier years, I'd ended up here in this cabin with this impossible companion. It felt like a gift I didn't deserve. but would be grateful for until my last breath. I'm 78 now. The Bigfoot is probably close to 40, middle-aged for the creature's species, if my research into great apes is any guide. We've been together for 36 years, more than half my life. All of the Bigfoot's life that the creature can remember. I move slow now, my body worn down by time and weather and work. The Bigfoot has slowed too. The creature's fur is more silver than brown. The Bigfoot moves with the careful deliberation of age, but the creature's eyes are still bright and intelligent, still watching me with that same intensity I saw the day we met. We have our routines. Every morning, the Bigfoot helps me out of bed. The creature makes a breakfast of fruit and vegetables for both of us. We sit on the porch, if weather permits, watching the forest wake up. The Bigfoot still bathes in the creek every day. Though the creature no longer stays in the water for hours, I watch from my chair as the Bigfoot carefully grooms. The same ritual I've witnessed thousands of times. In the afternoons I sleep and the Bigfoot works in the garden or disappears into the forest for a while. The creature always returns before I wake, as if the Bigfoot times it perfectly. In the evenings, we sit by the fire. Sometimes I read aloud and the Bigfoot listens. Sometimes we just sit in comfortable silence. Sometimes I play music and the Bigfoot sways gently, eyes closed, lost in sound. At night, the Bigfoot sleeps in the room I built all those years ago, but the creature leaves the door open between us. If I wake and call out, the Bigfoot appears within seconds, checking to make sure I'm all right. If the creature has nightmares, I hear the distress sounds and talk the Bigfoot through them. My voice, apparently as soothing to the creature as it was to that terrified baby I found in the snow. I keep a journal now of our daily life, writing down the small moments that make up our existence. The way the Bigfoot arranges rocks each morning in a different pattern, like the creature is creating temporary art. How the Bigfoot hums while working in the garden, a sound I've come to associate with contentment. The gentle way the creature helps me walk, always patient with my slow pace. These details matter. When I'm gone, someone should know that the Bigfoot had a full inner life, that the creature was more than just a cryptid or a legend. The Bigfoot was a person in all the ways that mattered. My neighbor visits weekly now, bringing supplies and checking on both of us. He's become a friend to the Bigfoot too. The creature will sit with him on the porch, and while they can't really communicate, there's an understanding between them. My neighbor has promised that if anything happens to me, he'll make sure the Bigfoot is cared for. He's even mentioned teaching his son about the creature, passing down the responsibility to the next generation. It gives me comfort to know the Bigfoot won't be alone when I'm gone. People ask me sometimes if I regret my choices, living alone, staying in this remote cabin, missing out on the normal markers of old age like community centers and grandkids, soccer games and book clubs. I tell them no, and I mean it. I never expected to find purpose in that blizzard. I never expected that rescuing one small creature would give meaning to decades of my life. I never expected that a baby Bigfoot would grow into my closest companion, my helper, my friend. Looking back, I can trace how we changed each other. The Bigfoot learned to trust humans through me, learned gentleness and patience and care. The creature developed skills and habits that no wild Bigfoot would have. And I learned that family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you find in a snowstorm, the one you build day by day through small acts of kindness and companionship. The Bigfoot sits beside me now as I write this. The creature's head is tilted, watching my pen move across the paper with curiosity. The Bigfoot doesn't understand writing, but the creature understands that it's important to me. So the creature sits quietly and waits, just like the Bigfoot has been sitting quietly and waiting beside me through all these years, patient and constant and inexplicably loyal. Sometimes I wonder what will happen when I'm gone. Will the Bigfoot return to the forest? Will the creature find others of its kind? Or will the big food stay here in our cabin, maintaining our routines, keeping our garden, sitting on our porch, watching seasons change? I've made arrangements. My neighbor knows about the big food now. I've shown him how the creature likes things. I've written down everything I know about the Bigfoot's diet and habits and needs. When I die, my neighbor has promised to check on the creature to make sure the Bigfoot is all right, to help if help is needed. It's not perfect, but it's the best I can do. The truth is, I don't know how much time either of us has left. Could be years, could be months. But however long it is, we'll spend it together the way we've spent the last 36 years. Two beings who should never have met, who ended up saving each other in ways that matter more than survival. I found the Bigfoot in a blizzard, a dying baby that no one else would have discovered. The Bigfoot found me in my own kind of blizzard, a cold isolation of a life I'd withdrawn from. I gave the creature a home, and the Bigfoot gave me purpose. I raised the creature, and the Bigfoot kept me alive. We saved each other. The sun is setting now. Soon, the Bigfoot will build up the fire and we'll settle in for the evening. The creature will probably bring me tea the way the Bigfoot learned to do last year. We'll sit in comfortable silence, two old friends who've shared a lifetime, and tomorrow we'll do it all again for as many tomorrows as we're given. That's our story. A woman and a Bigfoot growing old together in a cabin at the edge of the world. Not fancy, not extraordinary except for the species involved. Just life lived day by day with unexpected love and stubborn loyalty and the quiet contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The big food just brought me my tea. The creature is being very careful not to spill it, concentrating hard on the task. I should finish writing now and just be here. Can this moment with this creature who chose me as much as I chose the Bigfoot? After all, we don't know how many more moments we'll get. For more interesting stories, check this out.